Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm 𝗦𝗂𝘆 and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Suzy Siegle. Suzy, you are an attorney, a business professor, and an entrepreneurship coach. You are the founder of LOCUS Mindset, a consulting company that helps leaders and entrepreneurs gain more control and thrive in their businesses and their lives by cultivating what you say is the most important factor for personal and professional achievement, the locus of control. Suzy, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. I'm excited and grateful to be speaking with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
That's fantastic. And we have quite a lot to cover. It's a fascinating topic. Before I do that, I would like to start with a little bit of background. So do you want to share with us an element of your story, maybe a key defining moment in your personal development journey?
Yes. No, I'd be happy to do that. You might be thinking, how did you stumble upon this concept of locus of control and why did you care about it? And I did in my own life, professionally and personally, because you start to look around and feel like, okay, how much of what I'm doing in my business, with my money, with my relationships, with my health is really within my control? And how do I make change in life to move forward? Mm-hmm. And what I was seeing was clients of mine when I practiced law, students in business, colleagues in the world, and they seem to repeat patterns, right, over and over again. And they seem to get the same result, even though they would consciously say, boy, I really want to go here. I want to set a goal. I want to change something about my life. And I saw that in mine as well. And the research really looked at where does change live? And why does it fail so often, especially on the things that really matter the most in our life, right? Our health, our wealth, and our relationships. So I embarked on this journey of research and development and applied knowledge, and then really found at the core where locus of control lied and why it was that when we change it, what part of the mind we have to work with.
Mm-hmm. Was there any particular time that shifted your attention towards research in that, or was it something that you were more or less always keen about? Sometimes I'm asking because sometimes there is a moment and something clicks and we change direction or we take a specific path. That's and I find that fascinating. That's why I'm asking.
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say about a decade ago, although it's been a pattern I had seen in my life for a while. But about 10 years ago, I started to recognize that, wow, I seem to be repeating the same destructive, anxiety-filled patterns when it came to interpersonal relationships, as well as with my work colleagues. You would notice the same type of anxiety, the same thought pattern, the same, stress, and you think, wow, here it is again. It's an old friend. It's familiar. And I wanted to make a change, right? I wanted to make a change. I was leading a team. I wanted to improve my family, my friendships. And I thought there's no other way to do this than to change me. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm starting to see the same thing happening with other areas of my life. Like, I would say, wow, this is not unique to me. I bet others are feeling this way, but it really is a personal journey first. So I said, what I'm doing isn't working and I'm going to change that. I'm going to figure out how do I actually get inside the brain and change how I think, how I show up, and how I operate, rather than relying on everybody else around me to change. Now, that being said, you see patterns also in others. You see patterns in a workplace, you see patterns in a person, and you go, wow, the same thing might be going on with them. How do I actually shift myself? And how do I then create a tool for others who might be asking that same question? So how do I move out of overwhelm, anxiety, worry, breakdown, conflict, seeing that everything outside of me is the cause for why I'm where I'm at? That was probably a decade ago. But if I'm really honest, I just became aware of it about 10 years ago. Before that, you're just an autopilot. You're just kind of in operating mode.
I think many people can relate to that very much. I personally can as well, because change, for some people it's impossible, and these people probably are not listening to this podcast anyway, but people who are into personal development and embrace change, I'm sure they have found often that you are very much willing to make some changes consciously, but something happens and you eventually you fall back into some old patterns or old cycles. So I think it is, and that's why I said in the beginning, it's a fascinating topic, because the concept that you describe explains that change and facilitates it. So do you want to explain then to us why do you say that, what is the locus mindset or the locus of control, and why do you say it's the most important factor in someone's development?
Absolutely. So Aggie, you said it very well. You said, why is it that we consciously want to make a change and yet something sort of pulls us back, right? I mean, you literally use the language that I want to talk about. So if we think about that in terms of a compass and a magnet, this is an analogy that I use because I found it really helpful for me when I was looking at how do I make real, lasting, permanent change, right? Not just I'm going to do something for 2 weeks and then all of a sudden I fall back, but really change. Okay, so if you can imagine the compass is like the direction, the goals you have in your life. Pretend this is your conscious mind, right? The things that you consciously say you want, better finances, better relationships, better health, whatever it is, you set your goals on New Year's Day or any time other during the year. This is the conscious brain, okay? Then you've got this magnet. And what's going on here is this is the subconscious mind, the more autonomic part of your brain. If you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about system 1 and system 2 and how powerful system 1 is. If you look at the emerging research in neuroscience and neuropsychology, you will see that about 90 to 95% of how we move through the world, decisions, pattern matches, is this autonomic mind. This isn't a mind that's asleep per se. People think of the subconscious as, well, that's what happens when I go to sleep. It is continuously operating. It's on all the time. Many times when we think we are evaluating and analyzing, we're actually remembering, we're pattern matching. So if you have a program, if you have something down here that's really deep, that was there when you were very young, that you've reinforced, a pattern, let's say, then when you put that up against the goals you want, look what happens, right? This is so much more powerful. You're using 90 to 95% to combat 5 to 10. So we do the change up here, it doesn't work, or it works for a little while, or we get frustrated because we just can't feel the difference because that's down here. So what is the locus mindset? So Dr. Julian Rotter in 1954 put forth the psychological theory of locus of control. And it's the degree to which we believe and perceive that recognition and reward in life is a result of our own actions and choices or the result of luck, chance, or powerful others. I love the powerful others term. So it's where do you locate, where do you believe and perceive, and I use those words intentionally, that the control over your life lies. This doesn't mean now, because many times when I say this, people immediately go to the extremes. They'll say, well, clearly I'm not in control of everything. That's right. But what you are in control of is your belief and your perceptions of what you're able to do about it. And how do you move through the world? Do you use everything external as an excuse? Or do you say, well, this is interesting, like we have a worldwide pandemic. Now, what is that going to mean for me in my life with my money, my relationships, and my health? What do I have control over? So you might hear people say, well, I put on the COVID-19 because that's not my fault. That's because of COVID. That's because I'm not going out. I can't. But is that really? Or is it because those actions we took were in response to that, but we could have chose something different? Then you look at and you say, well, what did someone else do that didn't? So this isn't to criticize people that have, right? I mean, I noticed myself eating probably not very well as well, but I recognized it was my decision. It wasn't something that happened to me that said this. So that's what we're talking about here. So a locus mindset is moving through the world with truly an internal locus of control. Why is it the most important mindset? Because none of the others will take root unless we get in here and we shift the control mechanism. You can talk about positive and growth and promotion mindsets, these fabulous mindsets, and we need them. But if you don't understand how to have the change take root, then they will simply be at the whim of the strength of your magnet mind.
Thank you. It's a beautiful analogy with the magnet and the compass that moves around. And I suppose that because the subconscious is not something that we are normally aware of, we see at the compass a point in somewhere and we think that's what we set it to go, but we are deceived.
Yeah, and these things run very deep. I want to be very clear. It isn't that people are walking around, sabotaging life and things because they want to. It literally feels like it's part of you. So when I was struggling with anxiety, when I was struggling in relationships, when I was struggling with conflict, it was like an automatic deep pull inside my body. You almost felt this somatic component to it. And if somebody were to say to me, well, that's still your choice. I would say, no, I'm not choosing this. This just happened. Because the response is so immediate. This part of your mind is where emotions live. It's where the fight or flight lives, right? The amygdala, the fear, the triggers, I don't want to be alone. I want to be loved. I want to feel valued. So this happens so quickly. And then we form a thought that says, oh, that person acts this way toward me. It's that person's fault. Or I don't like so-and-so, or I don't like this in my life. When really it's a belief and a perception that's here, and you can always change a belief. A belief is simply something you decided at a point in time with the facts that you had at that moment. It might still be something you choose to believe, but it might not be true, right?
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you about ways we can influence and change that a bit later on. Can you tell me, you already mentioned that it starts from childhood, but I wanted to ask about how it's formed, really, the core level of our mindset. Is it only based on our childhood or our imprint years, as they call it, or is it something that still gets programmed without realizing it during our life?
It's a great question. So it's both. I'm going to reference two books, and I do this because this is really my journey of where I began and what I started and what I was reading. And I thought if somebody asked me, well, that sounds great, but where can I go to learn more? Here's where. And by the way, you can always learn more if you go to my website, LOCUSmindset.com. I have a resources and research tab. So that's a really quick way, if you like what you're hearing, to just say, where can I learn more? But let's talk about, how does it form? Where does it start? So two books I would reference. One is by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and the other is by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dr. Bruce Lipton wrote he wrote many books, but The Biology of Belief. And Dr. Ben Hardy came out with a book, Personality is Not Permanent. Personality isn't permanent. And the concept there is the things that we think are ingrained in us, in our biology, in our DNA, in our personality. Oh, that's just who I am. That's just who I've always been, right? Mom and dad say, oh, she's just like this. She's just very emotional. She's very anxious. She's very, right. Okay. And we hear that when we are 0 to 7 years old. And why do I say 0 to 7? Because when you study the brain, the neuroscientists will tell you that that's really when the brain moves from being more in the theta and the alpha states to more of the operational states, the beta states, right? So you see this in law where people are really not held, like after the age of 7, they say, okay, you're actually, using rational thought, right? I know it sounds weird, but from 0 to 7, we're just like downloading things from our environment. We have no ability to filter, is this true? Is this not? What mom and dad say and do and believe and others in our world become part of us. So that's where they come in. And not through their fault. It's not like they're trying to do this to us, but we might code something as meaning, oh, wow, I'm not loved because look what happened here. Or I'm afraid I might be left alone, or I'm never good enough because mom and dad encouraged me to do more. Perhaps we formed a belief we weren't good enough. It's just human nature. It doesn't mean they did anything wrong, right? They might, but it doesn't mean that. So what Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about is our experiences are what form our personality. It's not our personality forming our experiences, which means we can change that. It's an adaptive response. It's literally a series of neural pathways, neural firings going on in the brain, synapses, right? So if something is working well for you, if you're a compassionate, empathetic person, it doesn't get too extreme where you're like caught up in other people's drama and, you don't have any time for yourself or for your things you have to do because you're always with somebody else and listening to them. But if you actually have a deep empathy and if it's working for you, great. We have a lot of those things in life. But if you notice you're repeating the same pattern or you start to see the same result, because sometimes people don't even know they're repeating a pattern. They just see the result. They're like, oh, here I am again. Why does this always happen to me? I always attract this into my life, right? That's an external locus. That's this belief system that somehow this magnet is just operated by everybody else around you. So how do these things form? Very early on and through repetitive experiences. That's why problems are stacked in layers. We often try to treat the top layer. Like how many times have you seen this where you're talking to somebody at work and you're thinking the person just doesn't get it? Right? They constantly repeat the same thing. They're in chaos, they're in confusion. And you're thinking, why don't they get it? Because it's not a conscious thing. It's a subconscious survival mechanism. So when we actually get in and we understand the brain, we understand where the autonomic subconscious part of the mind works and how it can change, that's when you see lasting effect. And that's when it feels amazing. Like you're like, wow, this doesn't even feel like you don't have to exert your willpower. That's another good book Benjamin Hardy wrote. Willpower doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's in the finite conscious part of the brain. When you actually get in and make the change here, it doesn't even feel like change because it's just the natural course of operation.
Willpower, relying on your willpower is exhausting. After a while, you run out of it fairly quickly. Some people have more than others, but it's finite for sure.
That's right. Some people do have more, people that have gone through really extreme training like military, Navy SEALs, they do. But it burns your operating system in your brain. It burns energy and it burns patience. So it's not meant to be a long-term change agent.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the biology of belief, which I only read it this year, back in April. I absorbed it in a few days. I devoured the book. It's certainly one of the best books I've ever read. It explains so many things about our health and everything, really. I think it should be a mandatory reading for anyone who wants to understand how modern science and spirituality, I would say, connect. It's amazing.
And that book, it really is deep in science. Dr. Bruce Lipton taught at a medical college. He taught, this biology, and he recognized that it was missing the epigenetic piece, which is now accepted science since 2009. So I share that because many times people hear this and they immediately match it against what they think, like a pattern, like, oh, this is woo-woo. Oh, this is self-help flawless fallacy, right? Look, I have a business degree, a law degree, a doctorate. I'm the last person that would go down a woo-woo route. I'm like, prove it to me, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt. So I say that because that very dismissal of this stuff is what's going on here, right? It's because we're told, oh, that's all psychobabble. Oh, that's all this, right? But then what happens is nobody gets change and they blame the world around them and they dismiss it. Now, you do have to have a discerning eye, right? You do have to say, well, wait a minute. Let me make sure this thing is verifiable, evidence-based, scientific. Let me just do my diligence on it. But the reason the biology of belief is so valuable is it actually provides a scientific example with cells and how, cellular structure changed, not because of the cell's DNA, but because of the environment that the cell was in. And then you think about the environments we are in and the ones that we create inside ourselves with stress hormones and cortisol. And so you can take that and it's very transferable, but it's a great book to really illustrate the fallacy that we have. We move through the world and we believe, and I did this and I still, I'll still notice myself doing it because it's human nature to immediately assume I can't change this because I don't know how, or it might be hard, or I have never done it before. But you catch yourself in, well, wait a minute, what do I have control over? So I might not have control over the weather, the pandemic, the things going on in the world as a result, but I do have control over, do I turn on the news? If I know the news feeds my mind with anxiety. I do have control over my thoughts. And if you don't think you do, that's this type of a work. And I agree with you. I didn't think I did either. I was like, oh, I had a thought. There's nothing I can do about it. Well, something happens before the thought that you can change. We do have control. When you tell people that, they think, well, I don't know if I could do that. That's a different conversation. But we can do that because what we'll literally do in locus mindset is we change the belief and perceptions at a subconscious level. We work with the part of the brain that's the more powerful operating system. So you actually get results and you get them quickly.
Thank you for this, Suzy. And talking about changing, then the magnet that you saw, the subconscious mind. My question is, can we really change our subconscious mind using our conscious mind to do it? And I remember I'm asking you that because referencing again Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, he was saying that it's difficult, if not impossible, to influence, to change the subconscious mind. And that's why he was talking about methods like the 𝗁 methods that are influence directly the subconscious mind without the conscious mind's involvement as such. I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes excellent sense. So first, the very fact we're having this conversation shows that we are increasing awareness by using our conscious brain. You know, like I didn't subconsciously stumble upon things. I had to consciously make a decision to change. So you do have to be open to change. Now, I suppose it is possible one could just be knocked over the head and then it's like, you know, I mean, I suppose there is a way it could occur, but that's not likely, right? So I would suggest probably what the way is there, the conscious brain is involved in opening the door to learn and also making the commitment to say, well, hold on, I'm gonna know that there's things I don't know and I need to learn. Now, he does talk about, and so this is interesting, you can through repetition, that's why after 7 years, you know, when you're 0 to 7, how do you learn? You just download. That's why language is so easy. Kids can watch a movie and they can do like the script of the movie twice, whereas we'd have to memorize, right? Because they have access to that downloaded part of the brain much easier. As we get older, this little rubric forms, this little sort of barrier between the conscious and the subconscious. It's designed to protect the beliefs that our brain believes we need to survive. If this was so easy to change, then if you had a belief that, wow, this is scary, I should run, or you would never survive. So the brain is actually designed to sort of lock and load this from 0 to 7, right? And then, okay, so why am I sharing? Because can we consciously change it? Yes, but it's like repetition. You got to keep beating it against the door. Now, you can do that. The reason why it doesn't work that much is it takes a lot of patience and dedication, and people usually give up once something doesn't work a couple times. So that's human nature. Human nature usually just derails it. That's why it's tough. It's also not very quick, and it can cause a lot of frustration, and you can actually stack other problems on top of it. So it is possible, but it's not the most effective way. It's like trying to move a 90-pound thing with 10 pounds. I mean, you suppose you could inch it forward, but then, you know, is it going to pull you back? Are you going to get frustrated and all that? So what we use in Locus Mindset is we have a framework. It's called the Thrive framework, and Thrive, THRIVE, is an acronym of 6 propulsion systems of the subconscious mind. So once a person says, hey, I get this, I understand the compass and the magnet, I understand my locus of control is in the subconscious mind, not the conscious brain. Now I want to get change. I built this course. I used to teach this all the time. I loved it. And I was like, I need to find a way to do it with my life because I have several things I'm working on, a full-time job, a very great job. So I'm like, I have to find a way to get this out to people quickly and in a way that is understandable. But we walk through each component, and each component, and 2 of them are handwriting and repetition. They rely on these ideomotor, these subconscious propulsion systems to really get that change. And I had tested it in a focus group last year. I did a focus group of 15 people. It was a very small qualitative focus group. And we used an instrument, an established, published instrument that I had secured permission to use that measured internal locus of control. And we did the intervention before, or we did the test before, then we did the Thrive framework, then we did it after, and we saw a statistically significant against a P of 0.1 change in locus of control. And the qualitative feedback was incredible. People had more time. They had no idea life could shift. Their relationships got better. Nothing around them really changed. They changed their beliefs and their perceptions. The second component of this, so critical. How do you form a belief? How do you form a perception? Well, you move through the world and you take in information through your five senses. That is the only way you take them in, right? There's no other way, right? So sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, everything is like part of our senses. When your belief system has certain truths down here, like let's say I'm an unlucky person, things don't happen for me, people don't like me, you actually calibrate your senses to filter for what is down here, to confirm and to match. And you will dismiss things. If somebody says you did a great job, you'll dismiss that if it doesn't match the model you have of the world. So this is locus of control. You're in control of this. You may not think you are because it's happening so quickly. But if you've ever encountered people who are always saying, I'm not liked, people don't include me, see, they're doing this to me again, did you see that? And you're like, geez, some of this might be correct, but I think you just tend to absorb the negative, and you wonder what's going on. It's because their perceptual filters are calibrated to confirm beliefs and fears. They may not even been their fault from younger time. And so they're actually creating the chaos, the negativity, and the disruption, but they don't see it. They think it's other people because they're literally like focusing on it like a missile. So that's why this work is so critical. You will move through the world in autopilot. You'll always believe it's other people not treating you the way you deserve. You'll actually create a cause celeb for yourself, right? And really, it's all here. And the only person you harm is yourself.
That's truly fascinating, and you explain it so well. I'm very curious. You said that Thrive is an acronym. Do you want to share what it stands for?
Sure, absolutely. T is for timing. So we do this intervention 15 minutes before going to sleep. You probably have about an hour, but okay, why do we do this before we go to sleep? Because how do we recreate that 0 to 7 malleable neuroplastic download delta alpha theta brainwave state? Okay. Recreate it by thinking, when does the brain naturally go there? Now you can use Psych-K, you can use EMDR, you can use hypnotherapy. Those have been evidenced to be very effective. I mean, people have different views on them, but when you actually look at them in the clinical sense for treatment, they're very effective because they get at that subconscious mind. Many people don't have time to go to hypnotherapist every week. They can't find one, they may not want to. So this was like, what can you do yourself? If you're a high performing business leader, entrepreneur, attorney, and you're like, Suzy, I don't have 20 minutes to meditate or do hypnotherapy. What can I do? Okay, good. I'll share it with you. Here it is. So when you go to sleep, your brain passes from beta to alpha to theta to data, right? It has to do that. The conscious mind has to check out or you don't fall asleep. You just lie there and you're awake, right? So while that happens, anything that's in the brain at that time, right, drops right in. It doesn't have time to get deleted, distorted, filtered out. So the closer that you do something before your brain passes through that, it's like a natural slide, the easier it goes in. Now, how do you know? Ever watch a movie or the news or do something right before you go to bed, whether you're texting with somebody or talking to somebody, and what happens? It shows up in your dreams, right? It literally, you're like, oh, I know why I did that. I watched that right before I went to bed. We don't even realize it, but we kind of have this understanding that anything we put in our brain, well, why is it? It isn't recency. It's because there really isn't this filter. So it goes right in. So let's use this to our advantage. Now, knowing that, don't put bad things in your brain before you go to bed, right? So that's a great example for no social media for people, no TV, because, again, people don't want to hear it. They're like, well, don't tell me that. I need it to relax. I'm like, trust me, it's probably not relaxing you, but maybe it is if you're watching calming, beautiful, like Fish Tank channel or whatever. But anyway, okay, so timing. So 15 minutes. Why 15? I want to get that as close to the time frame as it drops in as possible. If I said to somebody, oh, you probably have an hour, how many times do we say I'm going to go to bed in an hour and then something happens? So we literally habit stack it right after you brush your teeth or whatever your routine is, timing. H is handwriting. You do the intervention by handwriting, and we work with people on what they're going to do. They can pretty much figure out what are they going to handwrite that's going to change this magnet, right? And then repetition, they do it 3 times each. Because when you repeat something, you ever hear somebody say, oh, after I did it 3 times, it kind of became habit, right? It kind of became something I knew how to do. So repetition is another propulsion system of the mind because the brain says, wow, if she keeps doing this over and over again, it's probably important. Then I for imagination, V for visualization, and E for emotion. So then what we really do is we activate our imagination. We really visualize. We actually do a visualization piece, and then we get the emotion involved. And why do we do that? Because imagination and visualization create the concept that this is happening right now. And the brain, this part of the mind, cares about what's happening right now. It doesn't care about the future. So if you say, you get up in the morning, you're like, I'm going to be wealthy, I'm going to be healthy. The brain's like, that's nice, that's not happening today. And by the way, it's first thing in the morning, I'm awake and my conscious brain is ready to go and the subconscious is locked away. So that's why I would suggest, well, affirmations are great. I think anytime you do them, you'll see some effect. They're going to take root if they happen when they can drop right in. Okay, so the emotion, when you have an emotion, that's how you remember something. You know, if you think back in your life when you're young to events that really you remember, there was probably an emotion attached, either emotions you wanted more of or you didn't want to have again, right? Either a highly negative event or a very positive one. So we're literally using things that sort of sear in the new knowns. Now imagine if you used one of these, you get result. This is 6 of them. This is 6 propulsion systems. These are 6 propulsion systems. So that's why they're so powerful. And that's the framework. And I walk people through each one. I give them the research behind it. So if they're like, well, I want to see research that handwriting is subconscious. Well, okay, they do handwriting analysis and criminology because it's idiomotor and it has a direct line to your nervous system. So if something's going on in the brain, it shows up in the handwriting and therefore you can get things in the other way. So there's literally research for each one and then a very clear framework that's repeatable. It's 5 minutes a day. And you see change. I mean, I can never guarantee it. I'm a lawyer, so I'm very careful. I can't say, oh, you're going to see this or you're going to see that. But if you look at the website, you'll see people who have shared results. And those are, in my experience, again, not guaranteeing any result. They're very common. And they were for me. Totally changed my life. Completely changed my life. In fact, I use it every day. It is the best thing I can do for me.
Thank you so much. You actually, I'm thanking you personally because I think you gave me a missing link for myself personally, and maybe some other people who listen to this might relate. And that was the first one, the timing, because personally, to some extent, I probably not in the same way that you describe them, but I do the other parts of it, the handwriting, affirmations, visualization, and so on and so forth.
Oh, good. Okay.
I do them, but I never do them at that time frame before going to sleep. And what you were showing earlier with the magnet, that it gets blocked in the morning or opened, so these thoughts and affirmations and feelings drop in just before sleeping. It is something that was completely missing from my routine. So I think my timing has been wrong.
Well, this is so great. I'm looking for a picture on my cell phone to share. Okay, here it is. This is a great picture. I don't know if it's going to be able to be visible, but we're going to try. And for those that aren't watching the video, so see the red to the green? That's the zone you want to be in. And so that's the brainwave zone. So I just showed a picture. It almost looked like a stepping, ladder. And you want to be at the delta theta point. Really, the alpha is the bridge. So Age, what I'd love you to do is to try that now. Do what you're doing 15 minutes before you go to sleep. Like literally, you're in bed, pajamas on, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and really do it. And then I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we do another one. You come back and you share the results. And anyone that wants to try this, I mean, it's a very low price course. It's LOCUSmindset.com/thrive. You can pick that up. I've taught it before, but I can teach it pretty quickly. But I thought, this course, it has everything. Workbooks, it has stuff you can walk through. It really provides a guide for folks, and then questions. And then I even have people that said, oh, I want to teach this to my, that I have counselors and business coaches and social workers and psychologists. And so I do have a Thrive Coaches program where they can buy the license and then teach it indefinitely for folks. I give them the resources because it's so important. But yes, do this before you go to sleep. Again, this is the conscious, like I had to actually research this. So it took my conscious brain to say, okay, we're going to learn this. And then it was, how do I synthesize this for people so that it doesn't become unmanageable? And they say, I've tried that, it doesn't work. Okay, we're going to make sure this works because we're going to give you what you need at the time you need to change this part of the brain. It's a very surgical approach.
I will put in the show notes the link to your website and your course. And as for the surgical approach, I from the little that I've known you and some research I did for you, I see how academic you are. So it is very the evidence is a very big part of everything that I've seen in your work and your website. I don't think it could have been any other way with with your background. It's really fascinating. Suzy, I would like also to talk about something different than what we've been talking about, and that is leadership, which is again a topic that you are
love it.
You love it. And the first question I want to ask you, and it might be a very elementary question, but maybe for someone that is not exactly sure, I want you to tell me, when you say leadership, what do you mean? How do you define it?
Right. Okay. I'm going to give you what and I'm glad you asked, how do you mean? How do I define it? Because you can imagine that there's going to be people coming at it and they're going to say, well, how does Northhouse define it? How does Kotter define it? How does, Good Degree, all these, which there's so much, right? So it's a big topic, but I'll just tell you how I look at it. It starts with you first, and it's from the inside out. You're never going to see your professional growth outpace your personal growth and development. So you have to work on Jim Rohn said this. Jim Rohn said, work on yourself more than you work at your job, because you are the ones that have to change. And many times leaders, they believe, well, I've got leadership characteristics and I'm a dominant person, I'm aggressive and I can make decisions. And those aren't necessarily hallmarks of leadership. They might be effects of it. They might be things that are required. But where you really have to focus is, how do I show up? Have I done the work on myself? So I'm aware of my own triggers. So I'm aware of where is it that I don't, where might I react negatively if people talk to me or if they share feedback, all these things, right? And I had this because I internalized feedback and criticism of an idea as against me, right? That's my survival mind saying they don't like you. And I believed that, even though they would say, well, this idea, and I'd be like, oh, they're challenging me. And so it took an internal shift. So it's self-leadership. It's how do you show up? Do you finish what you start? Are you operating from subconscious programs that are designed to keep you safe, not do what's best in the world? Now, people hear this and they might go, well, this sounds very inward. Aren't we supposed to be about others? Yes. And see, that's the misconception is, in order to best serve others, you have to make sure that you have done the work on yourself. You're never going to see change in others until you show up that way, with vulnerability, with awareness, and with a commitment. I didn't say confidence, because you're never going to be confident the first couple times you do something, but the commitment to do it. So when I think of leadership, it starts with yourself first. It starts with how you show up, the type of person you are. Are you aware? And do you have control of your locus, right? Do you have that internal locus of control mastered? Because you understand that what holds you back in life isn't that you don't know enough leadership strategies and tactics. People go to these wonderful retreats and events and they say, oh, we learned this new exercise we're going to do with our team. And why do things fall apart most of the time? Communication and trust. And that's an inside job. So that's what I think of. And that's why Thrive is so effective for leaders, because they think, oh, wow, we're going to get leadership training. Tell us how to better manage our team. Tell us how to get accountability. And really what I'm saying is, identify in your life where you're seeing repetitive patterns repeat, they go over and over again. And then let's decide how you want to change that. And then when that happens, you're going to be able to consciously, because these are very smart people, figure out what you need to do. But why do we get stuck repeating patterns, almost like a record that won't end? It's because it's something inside of us that needs to change.
Thank you. And I asked you this particular question because I'm sure that you've seen that there is this misconception by some people on what leadership is. And you actually answered to some extent my next question before I asked it, which would have been, what is the connection between leadership and personal development? So in a way you already answered it, but if you want to expand a bit more, I would be more than happy.
I mean, you said it, the connection is strong. Leaders that are committed to personal growth and development, again, not in an inward way of saying, well, it's about me, but looking at where do I need to change and grow, and really being committed to that. That's why reading Benjamin Hardy's book, Personality Isn't Permanent, is so important, because I can't tell you how many times I work with leaders and they say, oh, you know what, I took this assessment and this is what I am. And I do this too. In fact, I just took an assessment. One of my colleagues said, oh, I have this really cool assessment we can take, because you want to see where you're at. But it's the knowledge that just because this is where I'm at doesn't mean, or just because these might be my go-to responses doesn't mean that that's controlling me. I can decide to shift. And those responses, by the way, those are formed by our early experiences, right? Those shape our personality. Our personality now it can shape it after that, but we become who we are through our experiences. And therefore, we can always change who we are if we're committed to developing new ones. So leadership without personal growth and development, to me, is missing. It's hollow. It's two-dimensional. And it will you'll likely hit a limit to how far you can go, because you'll always be in it for you and operating from your own weakness and scarcity than in it for others, which says, I'm willing to change how I operate if I get a better result. And, you asked me in the beginning of this is a nice way to kind of round out. You said, what pivotal point in your life, where was that crux? Where was that thing that said, how I'm operating is too painful, I want to change, even though change is scary and painful. And it was this realization that I wanted the result of a positive relationship, removing anxiety. I wanted that result so much more that I said, I'm willing to change and just completely remove anything I do or who I am, because I knew it wasn't connected to my identity. That's another thing. I'm willing to change anything about me if I get a better result, if I show up in a better way, if I can become a better leader for my team, a better spouse, a better parent, a better sibling, all of that. I was willing to make that change. And I knew, because I had read enough and I had understood it at a fundamental level, that my identity is not my personality. It is not my behavior. And that's another one that's really tough for folks, because they identify with these things. They say, I am. They really do. And when you identify with something, it's like you're knit to it, it'll control you. And when you can say, I am a human being, I have this spark of life in me, I have something to contribute, I'm put on here, this earth, for a reason, whether you're religious or spiritual or whatever, I have this spark of God, the spark of life in me. And that's my identity. And everything else is a behavior. And if it's working great, I'm going to continue. But if it's not, I'm going to change. And this all respects our unique gifts and talents and everything else, because it actually amplifies them.
That's great. I was actually thinking of asking you about the identity and the behavior as such. Somehow you are ahead of my next question. I don't know, it's great. So you think that the identity is something way behind or way deeper than... I'm just trying to comprehend that completely, what you just said about the identity and the behavior or the personality.
Yeah, so I want to be careful about identity, because it does have a range of meaning and importance, right? And I don't want anyone to hear this and think, well, wait a minute, how does this play into this part of identity or whatever? So let's look at it differently and say, let me reframe it this way and say, we're more than the experiences we had as a kid. We're more than our memories. We're more than the traumatic events, the names people called us. We're more than all of those things. So we are able to change how we perceive and believe things about ourselves. We're able to see it that we're worthy for who we are, right? Not what we do, not what others think. I mean, I will tell you that if every assessment I've taken, psychological self-assessment, I tell people this because I'm very open about it. I think you have to be, if you're going to lead change, you have to be open to this. It will surface in some form or another. I have a concern about being liked and being accepted and being left alone. Now, I bet everybody listening goes, well, so do I, right? But really, I mean, I do. So it shows up in my leadership, and I have to be very aware of it. And I even told my team that. I said, look, this is something that is a blind spot for me, because at times, not all the time, at times I might be concerned about making a decision because of how I'm seen. And I want to be aware of that so that I don't show up in a way that isn't useful for all of us. So that's what I'm talking about is, somewhere deep in me growing up when I was younger, those were very important things for me. And that became a dominant, piece. Now, other people, it might be something slightly different. They might say, well, I don't really care what people think. And they might truly not, right? Or they just might not want to, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever that is. But I know that I am capable of more than being limited by that belief that isn't true about myself. So you have to decide, who am I? That's a personal choice and decision for everyone. And then what beliefs might I have about myself that are really mine, even though I feel like other people are giving them to me, or it's just other people think it. That's the other thing too, is that from psychology theory, transference and projection. Many times the things we think other people think about us are really worries we have about ourselves, even though consciously we say, well, that's not true. I don't think that. That's here. So that's the other piece is you're not always aware of what you believe and perceive here. You just see the symptom show up in your life. So I don't know if that was really a full answer, but that's what I'm talking about is being willing to say, just because I might repeat a pattern where I get upset at somebody, or I like people have family patterns. We're coming into the holidays and everybody's like, well, I don't know now with COVID how that's going to affect family time. But, people talk to family like, oh, I don't want to go see family because this happens. It's the same thing over and over again. I think we're more than that. I think we're more than that as human beings.
Completely 100% agree. Suzy, it's completely a very intriguing conversation. I want to thank you very much. I would like to also ask you some quick fire questions to start wrapping things up. So the first one I always ask is, what does personal development mean to you?
I would say it means to me a commitment to become the very best I can be to help and serve other people. Because if I just do it for me, you can't just do it for you, because number one, you won't do it. And number two, I believe there's something in the human heart and the human spirit that is made for something more than themselves and to give to others. And I know for me, when I think about myself as operating to help other people and help a greater cause, an organization, a company, a business, that lights me up and it turns the focus off of me. But in order to make sure I can do that in a way that is authentic and real and doesn't come packaged with a bunch of negative scripts, I've got to do that work. So it really means delving into the subconscious part of the brain. This is really where things are, right? So personal development is locus of control development, is understanding that locus mindset so that you can show up as your very best leader, your best self to the world. And you can move through the world in a way that you're going to have trouble. You're going to have adversity. That's the nature of the world. But you get to decide how you show up and operate. And somebody said something recently, and I've heard this before. They said, this situation has happened for me, not to me. And that's a common phrase. I didn't coin that. Somebody else did. They said, things happen for you, not to you. And that's a really tough thing to get when things are rough. And I would not expect anybody to say that during a tough situation. It's the idea that you can come out of it and look back and say, what is it I needed to learn? And that's personal development. It's not going to mean an easy life. It's just going to mean you're going to move through the world in a way that's going to take that to make it useful for someone else. Like, what can I give now to someone else? And I do believe that. I think the adversities we have in life, this has been true in mine, are opportunities for us to grow and then to share with others. Even if that's tough and even if it makes you vulnerable, because, we worry, like, if I tell somebody I went through this, what will they think of me? And yet that's the very, Ryan Holiday wrote another book, The Obstacle is the Way. That's the obstacle so that you can have that way.
It's, you see me smiling now because I get exactly what you mean, and I agree with you about adversities. And if we choose to grow from them and share them with vulnerability, that gives tremendous power to the people who are getting the message. Suzy, if you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you would give her?
You're so kind. I said 10 years ago and you're thinking, oh, that would put me at 18. Let's go with that. No, it won't, but that's okay. It's a great point. It would be that I probably would give them the advice I would say with Locus Mindset is you're capable of regaining more control of your life. And you're going to have experiences, and this is how you can approach them with an internal locus mindset. Understand that you're more than what's happened to you in the past, and that most of what you're perceiving and believing may not even be your own beliefs. This is all up to you, what you'd like to do, and you have control. And I would just show them the compass and the magnet, and I'd explain that and say, so as you move through the world, identify what patterns you see. That's another real quick thing is in life, you're not always going to know what's down here because it's locked away. You might have an inkling, right? You might guess at it because real astute, aware people say, well, I'm not really sure what happened, but I see a pattern that suggests there's something here that I'm repeating. And also focus on what you want in life. Don't focus on the absence of the negative. So that's another thing we cover in the Thrive program. Your brain is wired to look for the problem, like 2/3 negative, because it wants to protect you. It's how it's built, right? And so if you're constantly focusing on something like, oh, I wish this could happen. What if this happens? What if this happens? I got to be ready, right? That was my thought pattern. And it's still one that I have to work on. Then you're not going to be focused on where you want to go. And, they joke about this. They'll say, how do people run into trees? People that are driving and sober, how do they? Well, they're looking at it, like where your focus goes, your energy goes. You can actually head there. So I would tell my younger self that, and that there always is a way out of something and a way to resolve it. This is your emotions and your reactions should not guide your decisions. They can inform them, but, a professional operates with commitment and clarity. And people who are amateurs and novices tend to be driven by emotions. And I was somebody that happened a lot in life. We all know we make decisions emotionally, and then we kind of bring our conscious mind online. But I would make incorrect decisions emotionally, really extreme ones, because of the patterns and the programs and the beliefs I had here. So people that really cared about me, I would dismiss from life because I misinterpreted something. Right. And so that's not a very good way to make a decision, nor was it a good outcome for me, but it felt in the moment right.
Yeah. Tell me one more hypothetical question. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change something in the world as it is today, what would you change?
Wow. What would I change? Just one thing, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you asked me this question. When I was younger, and I'm going to answer it. Don't worry. I'm not going to do the lawyer answer, which is let me talk around it. But when I was little, I used to like the idea of like the magic lamp and a genie, and whether it was I Dream a Genie or Aladdin, And I thought, if you only had one wish, what would it be? And I thought, well, it's easy. It would be the ability to grant unlimited wishes. That would be my one wish, right? Okay, now I just rememred that when you said
cheating.
that. So,
that is cheating.
Yeah. Talk about pattern matching, right? So I won't give that answer, but I just thought of that now. I would say if I had to change, it would be the ability to help people see that they're capable of great change and great impact in the world. Through what we're talking about here, through a locus mindset. It would be that ability. And it's not that there aren't things to change, like poverty and war and fear and, discrimination. There are some horrible things. I agree. And so, it's hard to make a list of where you start. They're all priorities. But I would say if it relates to leadership and mindset and really helping people on a deep level, so that even if we can't change all these things overnight, you can move through the world in a way that doesn't cause you anxiety and illness and disease and stress. It would be the ability to see how we can actually make real change in our lives and how you feel and how you show up and how you relate and how much control you actually have. And that's an encouraging thing. It's not a judgmental thing. We actually have more control than we think. And I'd love to help you see how valuable that is for you.
It's very encouraging and empowering to realize that. Suzy, emerging from all this conversation that we've had, if you were to give the listener one actionable item, what would you share? What would that be?
Well, and I say this in a humble way, but start a Thrive practice tonight. Start making the change you want to see tonight. Take a look at your life, like those Polaroid cameras. They're now coming back in style. Take a snapshot of what's working and what's not. and then begin to make the change you want to make so that you can show up better, because we're all put here for a purpose to have an impact. I'm convinced of that. I've worked with so many entrepreneurs, especially student entrepreneurs, and it's very clear to me that they have something in them that has just been there since they were younger, that's pulling them into the world that they're here to do. It doesn't have to be this huge revolutionary unique thing, right? But it's an important piece. That's how they're here. They're made that way. And they're beautiful, and it's a beautiful thing. And so I'd love to see people do that. And the way that you can best do it is to make sure you are set up as a personal person, as a leader, self-leadership, so that you're ready to do that. And when you can do that, then you go out and impact the world. And, I love business because I believe business it touches every area of life, and it has an incredible value to create value in the marketplace, to help lives, to change the world. And it's done when you have business leaders and entrepreneurs and professionals that show up in the world in the way that, that's their best self. And how do you get to that? Locus Mindset, I would say. Start something today.
Tell us also then, how can people connect with you? Where would you direct them?
Say go to LOCUSmindset.com. There's tons of free resources on there. It'll help, to kind of frame around the different areas we've talked about. And then they can start the Thrive course if they want. And then by appointment only, this is really limited because of time, but I do work with resilience workshops where I'm trained in the HeartMath system. We haven't even talked about HeartMath, but heartmath.org, that's a great system, a very science-based, evidence-based system. And that's designed to give leaders real tools in the moment, like in your day, on how to make sure it, you don't go into stress or overwhelm or anxiety. Have all that stuff, So so I can do that with someone, but that's on a very limited basis. But the Thrive course is really the best way. LOCUSmindset.com/Thrive, and then all the resources that are on there.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Suzy.
We have a YouTube channel too. I don't put a lot of videos on there now, but there are some videos that touch on this that I actually started for my leadership students a couple years ago. And then just kept up because I had a community that kind of joined and on an email list and all that we worked with. But there's some things there. Thank you so much. This has been great. I love the opportunity to talk about this, and I appreciate the work you're doing, 𝗂𝘂, because it's such valuable work for people. And it's real. It provides real help, right? It provides them actionable things you can use right away. Like you're going to take the timing and you're going to use that right away.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's the whole point, isn't it? We can theoretically talk about things forever and ever, but unless we take some action, nothing changes. And that's something that I know I have suffered in the past I thought I was into personal development because I was reading the books, but I was doing nothing with the knowledge I was gaining. So I wasn't really developing apart from my bookcase. Anyway.
Real quick, I think that's so critical because when we go to bookstores nowadays, if that is something people can do, but I think so on a limited basis, right? You go to a bookstore and you see the big self-help section, and there's so many great resources, and they're there because people have gone through things. But why don't we see change? Because it's not enough to know. It's not enough to read. You can even believe it and say, this makes sense. I need to do this. But when you've got a pattern and an operating system that's pulling you down, not that everybody is doing that, but we do have things in here that don't work, or we wouldn't be in the self-help section, right? That's why you don't see change. And there's a really great video on YouTube. If you Google the backwards bike,
yes,
this is a great video to show the power of the subconscious autonomic mind visually today. These German engineers took a bicycle and they re-engineered the handlebars. So when you turned right, it went left. And when you turned left, it went right. So they made it backwards. And they told people, we've done this. This is backwards. So when you go to ride it, don't turn right if you want to go right. Turn right. Okay. So people are like, I got this. I can ride the bike. One could ride the bike. They couldn't even go to, it was almost ridiculous. They would take it to speeches on stages. They'd offer people $200. Okay. Why is it that it took an adult 9 months? He actually, one of the engineers tried 9 months every day for an hour to actually ride the backwards bike, because riding a bike is idiomotor. So like handwriting, it's ingrained in your whole system. It's a series of, it's not conscious, even though it feels like it is, right? You might consciously turn something, but it really is linked into your system. That's the power of these beliefs and these scripts. Now, interesting, the engineer's son, who was much younger, I think he was 5, maybe 4 or 5, he learned in like 3 months or 3 weeks. He learned very quickly. I forget the exact time frame, but watch the video, because the brain is more neuroplastic, right? That's why when you're operating in that system of the brain, the timing, you're going to get results quickly because you're literally dropping it in.
Fantastic. Suzy, I want to thank you very much for this fascinating conversation. I want to wish you all the best with your work and keeping empowering people and helping them. Any last parting words?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity and for the work you're doing.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and rate Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts, and also share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to become part of an exclusive community, gain access to unique content, and at the same time support this podcast, then become my patron. The link is in the show notes, or you can type bit.ly/pdmpat. If you want to know more about what I do and how I can help you, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. Again, the link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/pdmgroup. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,